A new report shows that Black and Latino Americans are incarcerated at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. And in 12 states across the U.S., more than half of the prison population is Black. Joining us now to talk more about this disturbing and staggering statistic, we're joined by Leslie Ricard Chambers, the Deputy Executive Counsel for Governor Bel Edwards of Louisiana. Also joining us is Quinton Washington. He's an attorney and former magistrate judge. I'd like to welcome you both to BNC Live. It's a pleasure to have you here. So the Sentencing Project reporting Blacks are incarcerated again at nearly 5 times the rate of any other racial group. As a former judge, what is contributing to this staggering statistic, sir?
Well, one of the things is that you don't have any alternative sentencing means at your disposal when you're sitting on a bench, right? I sat in Fulton County, as you know, which has one of the highest concentrations of African Americans in the country. And part of the issue is when you're sitting there, do you sentence someone because they're there because a crime has been committed, or what other options do you have? And so I'd see hundreds of African Americans a day. But what other options do I have? Because alternative sentencing does not get much funding. And people are looking at doing other types of courts. And Georgia has been at the forefront of having different types of sentencing courts for veterans and substance abuse and homeless courts, et cetera. But at the end of the day, because you're sentencing because the alleged crime has been committed, you don't have many options.
Leslie, what do you think is contributing to this staggering statistic?
Well, I can tell you as a former prosecutor in the courtroom, trying many violent crimes and prosecuting a variety of cases, one of the biggest issues that I saw was the high number or high frequency of prosecutors charging for low offenses, such as small amounts of possession of marijuana, some misdemeanor thefts. And I don't think that often enough we have enough key players in the courtroom who are thinking about the reasons behind some of this criminal activity, especially the low-level activity. And so we get this influx and this overwhelming number of cases in our courtrooms that, unfortunately, the way that they resolve themselves is by a conviction, either by someone being incarcerated or someone being given a probated sentence. And so that's something that I think as states look at how they reconcile how these injustices have played a major role in our communities, and particularly how Blacks overwhelmingly represent the number of individuals in our correctional facilities, as well as our local parish and county facilities. It's something that DA's offices, I think, have to be at the forefront in acknowledging, number one, some of the contributing factors that they've played in that increase of minority individuals in these prisons and in these institutions, and two, helping really to identify what resources can be available that they can offer to people so that they can so that they can end these perpetual cycles of incarceration.
Well, to piggyback off of that, Attorney Washington, I want to ask you this next question, and Leslie, I'll come back to you. California recently ended its mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug crimes. If this was done on a federal level, would this drastically, in your opinion, lower the incarceration rate?
Without question, yes. But the problem that you have with this is there the political will to go and do this at the federal level? And so one of the things we still have is that, and I still find this baffling to me, is marijuana is not legal in the U.S. yet. But you have states which are still saying it is, depending upon what voters have decided, and you have different municipalities that are taking different stances on it as well. So what is an officer supposed to do? So because when an officer pulls up, that is a crime, but at the same time, some jurisdictions it is, some jurisdictions it isn't. And I don't know why we have not been able to address one way or the other. It's either illegal or it's legal. It can't be illegal in some places and legal in some places, because I don't know how the full faith and credit works. Throughout, and I know that's inside baseball a lot for a lot of people, but I don't know how laws are not being applied evenly surrounding a substance such as marijuana throughout the country, and that's just one example.
Yeah, we know, we know that Congressman Cory Booker and other congressmen actually tried to pass some law on a federal level but received pushback. Leslie, did you want to respond?
Well, I agree with the judge on a variety of points that he hit. I think that one of the things that we've got to really take a hard look at and have a hard conversation about is this idea of justice reinvestment. Instead of the state spending money to send people to prison, why not look at how we can reinvest that money into programs and resources and alternatives to incarceration so that when a person is triaged into the criminal justice system, in other words, when they come into contact with law enforcement has other tools available to them other than having to result to taking that person to parish prison. I can tell you here in Louisiana, we've got a few places, organizations who have been able to start or created facilities or built facilities rather that could house individuals who officers can easily identify who have some sort of substance abuse issue or mental health issue. And instead of putting that person in a jail cell, they take them to that facility so that they can get the help and the supports that they need. And I think that that's something that Congress, all state actors and all local actors across the country could afford to take a look at and consider this idea of reinvesting those dollars in areas that actually make a difference in people's lives.
All right, well, let's talk about reform. Someone said that the law is colorblind, but the people appointed to decide the cases, well, they do see color. How do we eliminate racial bias in the criminal justice system so we can move forward with reform? Would you say it starts there first, Judge?
And I'm going to tell you, that's a tough issue, and I can tell you why. Because when you're sitting there and you're making decisions, I'm only there because I've been brought in to make a decision about sentencing. I don't even get many times a jury gets guilt or innocence. So I get sentencing. So I've got sentencing to prison, and I've got some level of alternative sentence that I can do. Well, violent crimes many times do not have alternative sentencing options. And so at that point, I can't do anything besides probation or sentencing. And the other issue that I think is a greater one is that we as a country have to determine whether we believe that the government can provide alternative sentencing and that we can have government programs that do these types of things. Because if we don't make that decision, then there won't be alternative sentencing and there won't be other judicial options that we have, right? We're fine with doing drug court and veterans court and DUI court and, and all these other types of courts, but that takes government funding, right? And once you get into government funding, you then have these programs that have to continually be funded. Well, that comes from raising revenue, which is taxes. And that's a no-no for most elected officials. And so the question is, how do we get there to where we can do more things besides sending somebody to prison and just forget about them and they're not getting any rehabilitation? And that's a difficult question that we have to answer as a country.
This conversation deserves more time. Unfortunately, we are out of it. I'd like to thank you both for joining us this afternoon. Great insight on both sides. It was a pleasure having you.